From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, show about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure, life itself, in a purple beanie. I'm Ken Napzok.
Without a purple beanie, I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
I may have a smoothie in the background. I am Jennifer Landa. I better mute myself.
We are here, both on video, where you can see my beanie, or on the podcast, where you can imagine it. I also see it because I pretty much wear it in every photo when I do stand-up. We are going to do Questions of the Force, Cues of the Force. This is our episode where we take some questions from you, our audience, some great questions. Instead of doing it like on a live stream, we get to think about it. We get to ruminate over our answers. We got two good ones coming our way. Before we do that, we want to remind you that today's podcast is brought to you by our first A of the day, Audible. Audible has been a long-time sponsor of us, and I'm just trying to change it up, Joseph. Give us something new to the read here. Mm-hmm. Free audiobook download is yours, as well as a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles and growing to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Today, we're recommending one of our all-time favorite Star Wars books around these parts, Rebel Rising by Beth Revis. Download your free audiobook today, that or another one, on us at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audio book. Help the show in the process. But from the Audible A, Joseph, to the Ask A, we go to you.
Very good reading. Instead of just weirdly emphasizing one specific word like I did on our most recent episode, you just made it free-flowing and natural. I mean, I guess that's fun, too, to do an organic good read.
Yeah.
But I like screaming words, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right. Moving on to the asks, as Ken says. We are extremely grateful that we reached one of the goals that we have been talking about, which is getting back up to 400 paid patrons on Patreon. Patreon is the most consistent thing that keeps us going. We're grateful for everything that can keep us doing ForceCenter and hopefully growing ForceCenter. But the Patreon, we always want to pay attention to. Great to get back up to 400 at the time of this recording. We would like to continue growing and get up to 415 paid patrons, at which point we're going to do a Patreon-only live stream. Fun, intimate conversation, take your questions, all that kind of great stuff. There are all sorts of different levels to our Patreon, but that's why we're making it, not a dollar amount, but just number of people joining us. So if $2 a month is what you can do, that's great. We welcome that. It all matters. It's all great. And it grows the community as well as helping us out financially, because you get to be a part of the Discord and being there in a place that's safe to have Star Wars discussions. Jennifer's been in the Discord, so she can speak to that. Jennifer, do you have any words of wisdom about our Discord?
It's fantastic. It's a really welcoming community. People chat about all sorts of things, breaking Star Wars news, which I really appreciate. Ken's in there as well. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. So check it out and discuss Star Wars away. That is patreon.com/ForceCenter. We are on to our cues then. Any other business, Ken, that I'm forgetting about?
No, I think it's time for some cues.
Excellent. We have two wonderful cues from, our patrons on Patreon. The first one comes to us from Ventress87. Ventress says, what was the moment for you that made you say, yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan? For me, it was seeing the Battle of Hoth for the first time. I loved A New Hope. My favorite is Return of the Jedi, but the entire sequence on Hoth is when I fully bought in. This is a great question that we haven't really talked about in a while. And it's a question that I think is so affected by generational things, by your age, by when you're exposed to Star Wars. So, Ken, where do you go with this? What was the moment that made you say, yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan, or the moment that made you re-say, I'm going to continue to be a Star Wars fan?
That's a great follow-up there. I've talked about it, written before, of seeing the trailer of Return of the Jedi at a slumber party and me not being super familiar with what that was, Star Wars, and thinking it was even Battlestar Galactica, Tron. It was all of them rolled into one. I just thought everything was a space movie that I needed to see. But my friends got all excited. I saw the trailer and remembering what probably was an image that didn't actually exist in the trailer of Luke on top of Jabba's sail barge with the lightsaber out, and thinking, yeah. Turns out I think that was actually a magazine photo that I saw, but I thought it was in the trailer. Just my whole life thought it was there, because I went back when I was writing Why We Love Star Wars. I went back and watched the trailer. I'm like, oh, Luke's not in it like I thought. Just a different kind of Luke. But just that vibe and that feel pulled me in. But I think once I actually got to the theater that night in San Luis Obispo, the Fremont Theater. I was there opening night on a Friday night. I think it was the entire sequence of the sail barge over the Starlight Pit. I was terrified of the Rancor, of course, but once we got to that scene, that thing was what I reenacted on the playground. We had because this is the early '80s, kids, so we had this rusty wooden splinter-filled structure in our playground that had a piece of metal like just nailed down to wood, and we'd climb up it and maybe some rubber tires there. That was what they're like, kids, have fun, don't hurt yourself. And it was perfect to be either the sail barge or the skiff. And that was the scene that we'd react over and over. Love Endor, love the speeder bikes, love the space battles, all that kind of stuff. But for me, that sequence, Return of the Jedi, the jumping off the Starlight Pits, the lightsaber swinging, that's what I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jennifer, do you remember the first moment?
I can't. And it's funny because it's like a fish in water where it just was always a part of my existence. It was a part of the 80s. And I had so many memories where I would want to, reenact things from the movie, from Return of the Jedi, where I had this like funny tree branch that I would sit on, pretend I was Princess Leia on the speeder bike, imagine there were Ewoks in the trees. But I also would ride my bike and I would want to pretend that I was Elliot in E.T., right? So it was just all these things kind of combined. So I can't remember the exact moment where it was like, this is my life now. It just was my life. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I think I have, as I reimagined my young life, I've talked before about like a lot in the 70s, especially on television, looking just sort of like boxy and gray, lots of gray suits and boxy cars. And I think I must have had some like malaise as a very young person, because I was just incredibly drawn to anything bright, colorful, weird. There were reruns of the 60s Batman television show, and that was just like mind-blowingly cool. And I remember getting a coloring book, and my parents being kind of confused of like why I would only color pictures of Batman and Robin. Like, I don't want to. Who wants to color in Commissioner Jim Gordon? He just looks like my dad's boss at the print shop. Boring. I want weird. I want fantastic. So I don't remember the first thing I saw of the first film of Star Wars. I think it must have just lit up my light in my eyes and lit up my world. And probably the first things that I saw were, commercials for the first film and the action figures. Because tracing it back, I think I was confused, but I think there was the re-release in 78, and that's when I saw Star Wars in the theater. But I think for that whole year leading up to it, with Christmas, not Christmas because that wouldn't work, but my birthday and probably my brother's birthday, the action figures starting to come into our lives is where it was like, I need everything this. And I had the storybooks, and and that I've talked about that Escape the Death Star board game that my brother went off to kindergarten, and I played it with my teddy bear, and I just switched sides and the teddy bear often won. So it's an early lesson in life about being self-defeating, I guess. But then by the time that was all in Brainerd, Minnesota, and by the time we went to Portland, Oregon, where I lived for a little while, is in 80 for Empire Strikes Back. I was old enough to be cognizant of like, this is my entire world. I love it so much. I can't believe there's more of it and all that. So it's definitely, it isn't one particular moment. I think what it was, my dad was talking to me about this recently, of taking me to that first screening of A New Hope and being like, you were tiny and your eyes were, I was sitting on my dad's lap and my eyes were glued to the screen, and didn't cry, wasn't bored, wasn't confused, just glued to it. So clearly it filled some need in my young soul. So I think that's really where it started for me. Which I think can be different now when there's a lot more pop culture to choose from. And like, at this point, like an 8-year-old, and he's probably, maybe a parent and, an uncle or whatever, or somebody at school is like, you got to check this out. And you have your like first thing you see it, but like for our age, it was a little bit of that full immersion. Um, I do want to follow up with, Ken, what were some moments where your fandom was either reignited or your fandom was doubted and you reaffirmed, yeah, this isn't just, I liked it when I was a kid and now I'm just locked on this train. It's, I'm choosing to continue now that I'm an adult and I have more definition. I'm choosing to continue this fandom.
Yeah, like we've all three talked about before, Star Wars is definitely always there. Fish and Water is a great way to look at it, Jen. And it stayed. But yeah, we had baseball, sports, life, comedy, a lot of things maybe went up the depth chart, so to speak, over Star Wars. But little moments I go to, and Joseph, you've made a lot of wonderful references and jokes to it over the years here. But like being able to act out the Battle of Hoth, to Ventress's even question here, and her own thing in the video games. And when it's, the big one in '96, and you get to sit down on your Super Nintendo or whatever, or Nintendo 64, it actually put that tow cable. As frustrating as it was, that brought me back to the playground. And here I was, this time, early 20s, I think, or 20, and it's just like there was never a Star Wars, I'm too cool for Star Wars vibe, because I'm just never going to be too cool for anything. But like, it was like, oh yeah, oh god, that's fun. I just want to do that over again. I just want to do that over and over and over again, because it was so fun, and it brought me back to feeling like I was in the film. So that brought me in. There's other moments along the ways, but passing it back to you on that.
Yeah. Jennifer, how about you? Are there moments where you reaffirm to yourself as an adult, like, yes, I am a fan?
Yeah, I think, certainly when I was in high school. So it's like when you're a kid and it's all around you, it's just like it was such a part of popular culture. And then in high school, it became clear that it was not really cool anymore. And I was feeling very ostracized, very angry, sad. And so I went back and started watching the movies again. And suddenly that was when I really started to understand the lessons of the movie, which is something that I hadn't really gotten as much before. It really spoke to me in a new way, where it became this sorts of comfort. I'd come home after school, really depressed, and I would put on, Empire. I put on Return of the Jedi on my VHS cassettes that we had. And it just was like, it felt just so right. And I made my own patch, my own Return of the Jedi patch, because I couldn't find it anywhere, because Star Wars was kind of gone. I didn't feel comfortable going into comic book shops because I was, a girl, and I just didn't feel welcome there. So I just kind of did my own thing with it and kind of created my own little fandom. And I thought, gosh, I wonder if there's other people that like Star Wars as much as I did. And then the re-releases happened, and suddenly it became like, oh, Star Wars is back. And I started meeting more people. But oh my gosh, and the Nintendo 64 game, that was so fun. And obviously the prequels. But it was that dark time where it felt like I am a fan. I don't know if anybody else is. This doesn't feel cool. It feels kind of like I was like bucking the system. Like, I don't like the things that you like. I don't want to be a cheerleader. I don't want to go to football games. I'm a Star Wars nerd. And it's like that became my identity.
Yeah, no, I so relate to that. And I think it is, I'm sure there's some similarities and some differences nowadays, and with people who are younger than us. And I always love hearing about those. But for me, I went through that same thing of like, I loved it. It was comfort. It was fun, a million happy childhood memories attached to it. But then by the time I got into high school, I had legitimate interest that I could show. I was, in my dumb little rock band, and I could talk about drumming, and I was in art classes, and people thought, being good at drawing and painting was cool. So those are the things that were forward. But I was still reading comic books, which were much more gritty and adult than adults realized in the 80s. So there was a little bit of like, yeah, I kind of have to hide that I'm reading comic books. But the people who collected the comic books were like, no, they're like, yeah, they're full of murder and sex. But then Star Wars was this other thing where it was like, well, this is kind of this warm, cozy thing of the past. And it was a much more of a secret. I've shared this before about my brother finally getting fed up that my parents didn't buy a VCR. It's like, I'm getting a job at Dairy Queen, for God's sake, and buying a VCR. And we bought the pan and scan because I had no idea what it was. VHS of the original trilogy. Really came back into my life, got some like winks and nods from other kids that they still liked it. And borrowed those VHS tapes to another kid in a brown paper bag. And I think people thought we were doing a drug deal, but like, I can't let people see the VHS at school. So there was that sort of fear of, can I take this into my adult life? But at the same time, now that I was able to watch the films again and again, Yoda's lessons about what the Force was and how it worked helped me massively with learning to play the drums. And I think I don't think I would have articulated it at the time, but I think it was the first time of like, oh, this isn't just a cozy memory from childhood. This is something that is actively speaking to me in this moment and helping me become an adult, helping me become more of the person that I want to be. So that was really significant. Special edition coming out in 97 and realizing, oh, the whole world is now really cool with this. And all of my fun, cool improv and sketch comedy friends all want to go and we want to joke about it and we can do sketches about it and people are excited. That was another level. And then I think, kind of the final one was 2015, Force Awakens, ForceCenter, and the idea that, it can become part of my career as well. So it's always had the ups and downs, but it has continued to come back and go like, but now it can be a part of your life in a different way. It is the cozy childhood memories, but it keeps evolving. So it's not just the cozy childhood memories.
Indeed. Now, I remember sitting early on set with Maud Garrett as we built out Jedi Alliance and just thinking, and we were doing it for free, every Monday, 2:00. But just thinking, like you said, Joseph, like everything I've been has led to this. Not in some I'm going to conquer the world, but like took a lot of crap to get here. And now I'm sitting on a set in a Star Wars shirt talking about Star Wars. Here we are. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jennifer, I mean, your relationship with Star Wars with some of the costume stuff you did in San Diego Comic-Con and that must have been, how did it strike you then that your fandom that you had once been ashamed of is now something that you're living so loudly and so proudly and, getting a lot of views and applause for?
It was very strange. I was terrified when I made that Death Star costume. I'm like, people are going to laugh at me. I know it's Comic-Con. I know people wear costumes, but I was like, is this considered to be sacrilegious as a Star Wars fan? Right? There was something that was kind of cheeky about it that I was worried that, as we've seen in our fandom, people don't like it when you poke fun of Star Wars. Like, they want to take their Star Wars very seriously. And I do. But I also like the weirdness and the silliness of it, and I'm not afraid to just be dorky with it. I don't care about being cringe. I am cringe. And so, yeah, it was really fun. It was really fun. And now I see all sorts of people wearing all sorts of crazy things and crazy vehicles and stuff like that. So it's great. It's really great.
I think that should be added to the sort of the parody of Batman's list of things he is. Of, I am darkness, I am the night, I am cringe, I am Batman.
I went to my Young Guns too, where the James Coburn scene, you think you're the scourge of cringe? Well, by God, I am cringe.
There you go. A full embracement of cringe.
Love it.
I love that term has, become itself cringe. Cringe will eat itself. It's going to happen. We always love to hear people's thoughts and opinions, but man, have I got so much on ForceCenter of hearing the answers to these kinds of questions from people with different ages, different life experiences, different cultures. So, hey, if you have a story of that first moment that you became a Star Wars fan, or that moment where it had a bigger impact on your life, feel free to put those in the YouTube comments. We love hearing other people's perspectives. It helps so much to really understand the wide spectrum of Star Wars experiences. With that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment with another question. And we have returned. We talked very positively and lovingly about how Star Wars has impacted our lives, and now we have a not I wouldn't say a negative question. The person who sent this in said, "Sorry to be negative. I don't think this is a negative question. I think this is a healthy processing of what is resonant to you in Star Wars and what sometimes isn't for whatever reason." So with that said, we'll dive into this question from Lightspeed Bear. Lightspeed Bear says, "Hey, ForceCenter, hope you're all doing well. I had an absolute blast the first decade or so of quote-unquote Disney Star Wars. But lately I'm finding my engagement starting to wane a bit, and I'm trying to figure out why. I recently started to realize that the Disney Plus shows very often feature stoicism is a main trait for a lot of characters. Mando, Boba, the Armor, Bo-Katan, Fennec, Indara, Ahsoka, Morgan Elsbeth, Baylan, etc., at the expense of, in my opinion, any sort of personality or down-to-earth relatability to the character whatsoever. This certainly wasn't an issue in the 5 recent films, which featured characters with lots of personality and emotion. Kylo lightsabering a console to death in a fit of rage, Poe cracking jokes, K2SO's snark, everyone in Solo being very human in not only how they act, but how they speak. I could relate to a lot of these characters in some way, and they felt more real and likable because of it. Obviously, I'm generalizing, says Lightspeed Bear, because these sorts of characters do exist on the Disney Plus shows, and Andor in its entirety is the exception to this argument. But overall, stiff exposition-spouting Jedi characters like Indara and live-action Vernestra, who can't seem to use grammatical contractions, or a main character like Ahsoka, where fans celebrate in relief at the merest glimpse of a smile, might point to a shortcoming in this regard. Sorry to be negative, but would love to hear your thoughts. Keep up the great work. I do not think the spirit of what Lightspeed Bear is saying is negative. Reading again, Lightspeed Bear is expressing their opinions with some strength, and that's fine. Everybody has strong opinions about these characters. I think this is big picture, something that we've been talking about a bit on ForceCenter, of the amount of Stoic characters. So there's the kind of conversation about the amount of Stoic characters, and then I think there's also the really subjective questions about which characters are landing and which characters, even though they are clearly intended to be Stoic characters, which of them are connecting with us and why. So I think there are a lot of different ways to look at this. I think it's an important thing to talk about, because I think it is an observation that I agree with, that many of the main characters have been Stoic, and I'm so excited to dive in to the weeds of how we define that, in which characters speak to us, even though they are Stoic, and what our hopes are for maybe the huge amount of Stoicism on Disney Plus, where that might head in the future. So Jennifer, what's your starting point with this conversation? Where does your mind go to begin with?
Lightspeed Bear, you perfectly expressed what I've been feeling that I could not articulate. Boy, it's the stoicism. It's what we talked about in our news episode about the helmet of the Mandalorian, which I had no problem with initially, but over time it's like, And I know it's one of the things that I've had a difficult time with the people in my life trying to get them on board with these Disney Plus shows. They just can't get into it, because I feel like there's I don't want to say humanity lacking. It's just more like one note that I think if you're not into it, you're just not going to be into it. There's not really a place where you can find yourself. And Andor is interesting because my husband really enjoyed it until the one episode, spoiler alert, where the crew got killed. And he was like, well, you just killed off all the characters I liked. I'm like, now what? And so he kind of turned it off after that point. He did turn it off. And I think that there is a problem. I don't know. I feel like the Acolyte took risks, which is why I loved it. And we did have the Vernestra Rowe type character, which was a little bit more stoic, but we also had Master Soul, who was so expressive and emotive, and Osha and May and Chimere. Like, there just was more variation in it. But obviously, I guess it did not resonate with everyone. So I don't know what the answer is, because I think the stoicism is kind of working for them in The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, but for me personally, it's not my thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so excited to get into this, but just kind of big picture for myself, I think there's several different things combining, and one of them is, yes, there are a lot of Stoic characters, but which of them land for you? And is that based on performance? Is that based on writing and some of the sort of the structure things we've talked about? Are actors being asked to kind of play the same beat too many times, which is more of a writing thing to me, or even a directing thing? So there's this sort of like, in our vast collection of Stoic characters, which of them land for us, which is real subjective. And then there's this kind of this other side of, many of the Disney Plus shows are just in the grimmer side of things. And I think those are two truths that kind of overlap. And I would definitely put Andor in the collection of grimmer. If you're coming to Star Wars for a little bit of that Han Solo energy, where he's going to make some bad choices and there's going to be some dark stuff, but there's going to be some real fist pumping fun. there have been shows that lean more to the grim. So I think it's the stoic characters and a sort of more of the shows we've gotten are grim and tragic, like Andor and Acolyte. So there's this kind of, to me, a couple different ways to look at it, which I look forward to diving into more. But Ken, I want to hear your big picture reaction to this.
Yeah, clearly, Lightspeed Bear, I agree with you on at least one point there. I couldn't contain my laughter on some of the, shall we say, long-form dialogue. This isn't negative. And Jen, I'm right there with you. Mileage may vary on whatever show. Acolyte resonated with you and so many. It resonated with me as well, though I felt it was, churned emotionally at times where I think I needed what I'm looking forward to in Skeleton Crew, what I think I'm going to get with that. People loved Ahsoka. I struggled with just everyone being dour in Ahsoka until Ezra showed up. Remind me, in 2006 for my 30th birthday, I went to Vegas, and the first couple nights, my friends from home and my friends from LA weren't necessarily not fighting, but the vibe was off. And then one of my good friends showed up like the second night at 8:00, landed at the airport. It was like Fairuza Balk showed up and Almost Famous. Do you remember laughter? Like he was there and was like, yes, that was Ezra and Ahsoka for me. He showed up and I was like, personality, spirit, jokes, smiles. I needed that. Like you said, Joseph, it is subjective. There's been parts of Andor where I'm like, I don't like Perrin as a guy, but I kind of like him around this party. He's a little fun. Mm-hmm. He's got some personality, and I think the mileage may vary. It's just until we had talked. This was like an off-air conversation. I think we had first on ForceCenter from Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett. A show I defend more than other folks, and though we love it here too. But yeah, there's at times where I've just wanted it to explode off the page and explode off the screen in a different way. And you got your quills, you got your Grogu humor, you've got Peli Motto, you could pull examples from every show. You really could. B2Emo's got some energy. But I think overall, since 2019, I feel as though I've been waiting for a little bit of a rip-roaring, pop culture-y, all that pulp stuff we love here. And that's why recently when I talked about how I went back and watched Solo for the first time in a while, and I just fell in love with Solo again, even more than I've already loved that film. Because Tobias Beckett just being snarky while he eats food. Does she have sharp teeth on? Like all that stuff just kind of resonated with me all over again. And it's not negative. It's just an actual realistic look at the last few years of what we've gotten. And I'm looking for different sparks of life.
Mm-hmm. No, I really agree with that. And I think it's been emerging as this comes up that I think even the three of us are sort of different on which stoic characters, right, that are intended to be a little stoic, still work for us. Like I agree with you, Ezra, huge pop, but for me, like Sabine had lots of great energy, and I feel like it was more for me like some of the script and pacing that didn't let that shine as much sometimes. Soul, I think you could describe him as a little bit of a stoic character. He is a Jedi who doesn't say much, but he just was absolutely magnetic and full of life to me. I thought Indara for me was she is a Jedi. She is playing a character who does try to keep her emotions under control, but there was no disconnect. I felt everything that she was feeling. I thought Ahsoka's Rosario Dawson's performance as Ahsoka was great, but I thought the script kept her in the same gear for too long. Whereas for me, Boba Fett, Fennec, Din, those are all stoic characters who don't say much, and when they do, it's crisp and to the point. But they hold all sorts of charm for me. I never felt distance myself from Fennec, Boba, or Din, or Bo-Katan. So I think like mileage can really vary on those. Ken, for you, who among our sort of collection of stoic characters have you felt, like there's plenty of life there for me?
Boba Fett. I've talked often about, some of the big moments in that show where he's slowly coming to realize he can be something different and be the change you want to be, and all those things around him. I think there's some great life. Him, talking to his bantha. It's those little moments that really just make it pop for me. Absolutely love that. I but in terms of like where the stoicism works, and I know we're throwing that word around, but like Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Kenobi series, like, it's earned for me, right? And I just, feel I see and connect with a lot of things he's going through there. And that's why we keep saying mileage may vary. It's just where you are at a certain time of a show. So I never felt weighted down by it. I wanted to ruminate. I wanted to churn over the emotions with him. I wanted to gnash the teeth. I was right there with that journey. So that worked for me as well. But even Acolyte, I agree. Soul is both stoic and full of a lot of complicated and wonderful warm energy, right? Like he was fun to watch. He was one of my highlights. I could have watched Jackie and Yord do a comedy show off on the side too. That would have been something else. So again, those are some of the ones that work for me.
Yeah, Jennifer, how about you? Who has worked for you? You really loved Acolyte. This is a thing that's come up. How do you feel about the number of Jedi? If you feel like they're being expressive and emotional, where do you go with all this?
I actually go to the old favorites like Boba Fett, and how they took a character that was kind of like surfacey and kind of just stock stoic, and boy, that show Book of Boba Fett, which I love, really gave us so many more shades of that character than I ever imagined that character had. That to me really, really worked with that stoicism. Bo-Katan, Katie Sackhoff's performance, even though she is stoic, there is something going on underneath where it's like, I just love it. There's this tension that she brings on screen. That's like bubbling underneath her stoicism, the tension. Those two are my main ones. And the Acolyte, again, I think when you have so many different variations, and Dara worked for me because we understood where her stoicism was coming from. And we also see her compassion. So we got both sides of it. I don't know. I think the Acolyte did a really good job of balancing all of that. But I can see where it's a little bit one note in this era.
Yeah, and I mean, Jackie and Yord obviously had a ton of personality, and I think that spoke to people. Kim, were you going to say something?
I was just saying, yeah, overall, like I said, we could all find examples from each show of someone with a lot of life, and it's not just like someone cracking jokes versus someone just furrowing their brow. But the only thing I miss is like you talk about a Poe Dameron, you talk about a Han Solo, a character who's confident or either has misplaced confidence and is still going to go on a journey, but just has that energy when they enter a room, a Lando or a Han and stuff. And it's not that you couldn't find little examples along the way. Just think overall, I think that was what has been missing.
Yeah.
For me.
I do think that there is an element as well of some writing choices, and I think it goes to some of the structure things that we've talked about plenty with streaming. But I think a lot of these shows, there's a real minimalness, like Din and Boba and Fennec say kind of exactly what they mean, and sometimes they're like, ooh, intriguing. But Balin in particular said a lot of things that were cryptic. We could add cryptic to the word stoicism.
Cryptic, yes.
Because of the way the Acolyte was structured, it took to the second to last episode where we really knew where everybody was coming from. So a lot of lines they had, like somebody like Indar, it's not just that she didn't use contractions and spoke like a really emotionally controlled Jedi. It's that a lot of the things she said were potentially cryptic because we didn't know exactly what they meant or where they were going. So I think some of this is that the characters are all ones who are keeping their emotions in check, but also the way the writing has been structured. There's been a lot of like, ooh, that sounds really interesting, but we don't know exactly what it means, as opposed to Han or Poe just like absolutely blurting out like a 3-year-old exactly what they feel and think in this sort of fun comic way. I think there's a writing element to it for me as well. And I'm not even saying it is bad writing. I'm saying it is maybe similar writing, which has maybe exacerbated people feeling like, I want a character who just vomits their emotions everywhere, because we've had characters who are holding it back, and writing that is sometimes holding it back.
Yeah.
I want to look at the actual, just like the nature of like what the shows are, because we've been talking a little bit about characters, and Lightspeed Bear makes the point that for them Andor is full of life and humanity, which I would agree with. I think that it's written with a lot of realism. So just how is Bix and Tim Carlo's relationship going is played very human and very real. But I do think in the balance of Star Wars, the whiz bang and the pulp and the frankly feel good victories, they are there. As Ken, you keep saying, they are there.
Are there?
But just the big picture of what the shows are, Mando and Boba Fett they're grim, silent warrior types with lots of masks. Andor is all very human in their performance, but the story is grim, desperate people being choked to death by tyranny. The Acolyte, wonderful moments of humanity, but it is a tragedy where the characters who are the youngest and most full of life are brutally murdered halfway through, and we are left mostly with Jedi and a Darksider who are somewhat stoic and making horrific choices for themselves. Obi-Wan, to me, absolutely full of charm, but the mandate of that show is it's a depressed middle-aged man who feels he can't stop getting young people killed. It's his journey back to hope, and it ends with great hope. But that's what the show is can this middle-aged man who feels like he failed a child stop failing children? So kind of looking at almost like just like the log line of what the shows are. Ken, how do you feel about just the nature of it's not necessarily the acting, it's not even necessarily the episode to episode writing, it's that the thrust of the show, of these shows, are on the grimmer, a tortured character working through their trauma type of shows.
Yeah, I think that is kind of it. It's all kind of had a similar vibe and feel, and love it. And I'm not saying that other parts of Star Wars have been forgotten because, again, the reason we do the ForceCenter caveats is they're just bracing for impact of anyone trying to be like, yeah, I know, we know, but there has been this overall vibe of it's been similar, like you're describing, and I would love to see, that relationship between Han and Luke, the relationship between Han and Leia. Go to the prequels, some of the stuff with Anakin and Obi-Wan. It shows up in things, but just what's that series that could be there? What's that movie? I think we have to look more for movies in the future, obviously. I'm excited for a Lando movie as told through the eyes of Donald Glover and his brother, of a real cocksure kind of guy walking into the bar and thinking he absolutely owns this place. That's part of Star Wars too. It's part of going to the playground thinking you're as cool as Han Solo or as Han Solo thinks he is. And I would love to explore it. Again, if they were to do more shows, live action shows in the future, like what's an 8-episode season of a gang of scoundrels doing bad things? We'll see that. And that's why, again, looking forward to Skeleton Crew. I think it's going to be a little bit of a change up. I already love Neil looking at the camera going, what do you mean? Like, that's my guy. Love that.
Yeah. Jennifer, how do you feel about just kind of by happenstance of the way the projects rolled out that a lot of the Disney Plus shows have had something that's kind of baked in to what the show is that drives some stoicism or some grimness?
I think the thing is that Star Wars fans got what they wanted. For, during the sequel trilogy, people were saying, we just want something gritty. And then Rogue One hit and people were like, yeah, we want more of that. Give us more darker, gritty stories. So now we've gotten that. And now I think it works for some. And now I'm kind of like, all right, we got our gritty stuff. Let's move on to something fun and lighthearted and the swashbuckling adventure, right? It's just like when I'm eating too much of one meal, I've gotten tired of it. I want to switch it up and have something else. I also think that it works when you're doing things for streaming to tell more intimate stories. And those intimate stories oftentimes are more dramatic and like the internal conflict and the tension. And so it's just going to be focused more on that and less of just like action, fun, epic adventures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Ken, you've been talking about looking forward to Skeleton Crew. What do you think the antidote is to you for any too much gritty or grim or stoic? Is it having shows that are a little bit more of, hey, now we're going to roll out our feel-good buddy comedy? Or do you feel like it's more just like adjusting ingredients within shows so there's more balance?
Adjusting ingredients within. I know I've made this example before. Apologies to both of you and in the audience, but I felt season 1 of House of Dragon took all the wonderful big epic things from Game of Thrones and then just forgot a lot of the fun stuff and the character stuff that was not hard to be lighthearted in those worlds. Anyways, but just like, yeah, remember we fell in love with these characters hacking on each other, telling jokes, or just being themselves from a character point of view that was funny and entertaining. And a lot of that was missing for me, and it became this very dour, over serious show at times. They course corrected a little bit in season 2, where even one of the more villainous characters was the funniest of the show, and you suddenly were like, oh, I understand him more. It's not just jokes. It's just like, he's more human to me. And then it complicated his journey going forward for you as an audience. And I think there was a showrunner that left, and that was part of the reason why. And he's kind of a dour, serious guy too. In any interview you listen to him do, and I think that goes to your point of yeah, you know, again, there was nothing that Acolyte dealt with that I didn't want to have dealt with about the serious nature of all the things going on. But, and again, there was life. I keep going back to that. I apologize. But like, yeah, just bring all the ingredients to the table and make sure they're, you know, mixed in correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, some of it is, you know, for me, I really enjoyed the Acolyte, and there were some moments where it's like, I'm having a really hard week. I'm having a really hard day. And it's not a judgment of Acolyte. It's a like, man, I wish this would, you know, end with the smuggler making a joke and doing something wild, just because we take our day-to-day life into what we are watching, which I don't know if other people were affected by that with Acolyte. The Acolyte was, I think, a well-made tragedy, but there's also that question of like, is that always what you're in the mood for? So Jennifer, for you, what is the sort of the antidote, or the next steps that would make you feel like there's some variety in the Disney Plus offerings?
Season 2 of The Acolyte. I found it to be incredibly thrilling. I did not find it to be, dour or I don't know. Just like I found it to be what I was looking for. And even though it was like, it was heavy at times, and there were times where I was like, oh my gosh, this is almost too much for me. But it was exciting to watch. For me, I'm kind of tired of the Mandalorian, the Ahsoka. I just feel like it's just kind of like too familiar, and I want to go beyond that, which is what the Acolyte did for me. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Quite frankly, I think that maybe what's going to happen is we're just going to get less Star Wars, so that our appetite is a little bit more, we're hungrier for these things. We've had such a wonderful buffet of choices, and I think maybe it's been too much. I don't know. Maybe we've been spoiled, and Disney is going to say no more. You're going to get less, so you'll appreciate what we give you. So I don't know.
Well, they're definitely saying that. I don't know if it has anything to do with the buffet, but they're definitely saying no more live action TV coming. So.
Yeah, I mean, and we've been, I think, focusing on what are the elements of similarity that are maybe making some fans feel like there's too much grim, there's too much dour, and we cannot say enough. Yes, a lot of these shows have absolute moments of whimsy. There's hilarious moments in The Acolyte, and it was fresh, and that was thrilling, all these things. And I know the Obi-Wan show is not everybody's favorite, but I love it because it goes to quite brutal places and earns that ending that makes me cry every time of this middle-aged person who feels like he has destroyed his entire life and reconnects with hope. Like, there is a variety in these shows. So many people absolutely love Ahsoka, and there are parts of it that I absolutely loved and were thrilled by. And I think it did inject a ton more of the pulpy we've talked about. We did a whole episode about the pulp side with the space whales and the witches and a brand new galaxy and turtle guys with bow ties. Like, there's a ton of these elements. But I think for me, Skeleton Crew will bring some variety because it is baked into the DNA that it's kids get lost. And I don't think it's going to be like they almost get home, but they all die. They're going to get home. And Jordan and Norwood is going to at least partially not fail them, right? It's baked into the DNA of what it is. I think even Andor season 2 might be a switch up for me because so much of season 1 was, will you please fight Cassian Andor? And I think as we jump from time period to time period and the flame of the rebellion grows stronger, I think even though it's going to be dark and real and horrible things are going to happen, there might still be that balance of like, but rebellion and some victories along the way. So for me, it's more than anything, when I look at the like, what kind of vibe am I missing? I think of A New Hope. I think of Force Awakens. I think of Solo. I think of, frankly, The Bad Batch in animation. And when you look at any of those shows, dark, horrible, awful, real human things happen. It's just that they're balanced with a little bit more of the pulpy adventure serial pacing, a little bit more humor, a little bit more buddy comedy, a little bit more of the kind of the sort of the rough and tumble fringes of society kind of people, like, that would not behave well at a cocktail party like Han Solo. And I think that I just want that ingredient turned up. I don't need, like, let's go the opposite direction and everything needs to be light and silly and fun. I think, I always go back to A New Hope, and people walked out of the theater and said, well, what a remedy to the darkness. Like, Luke Skywalker loses 2 sets of, parental figures, 2 of them burned to a crisp. And there's a genocide. An entire planet is destroyed. There are dark things, but there's a choice to be, the overall emotional experience of it is pulpy and fun loving at the end of the day. So I just want a little bit more of that variety of ingredients. And again, I know for some people, like Ahsoka had it, Acolyte had it. This is all subjective, but it is something that's been coming up amongst ourselves and coming up in our comments a lot, of people feeling affected by this. So I think it's really great to have a conversation about what it means to us, because it doesn't all mean the same thing to all of us. Jennifer, any final thoughts on Stoicism on Disney Plus?
No. Lightspeed Bear, you're not negative. I feel like I'm being negative, so I'm not going to say much more. I just really bummed out with the ending of The Acolyte, and just, I feel like there's a lot of us that just feel like we're not being seen or heard, and we've made our voices loud and clear, and yet Disney is not hearing it, because, more of us are not waving our money. So, I don't know what the answer is. I'm a little frustrated, and I'm hoping that Skeleton Crew will bring some joy, which I'm sure it will. But, it's going to be a little bit bittersweet for me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally understandable. And I will identify another Acolyte action figure that I want to buy to at least wave a little bit of money. Because even though I have some qualms with the Acolyte, I do really like that it was different. And the reason I bring up some of my own ups and downs with it is because sometimes it's important to me that sometimes it's not about the show. Sometimes it's about what's going on. And there's gonna be a time where I'm like in a mood where I was like, yeah, I want to feel the pain. bring on the Acolyte and let me enjoy that, the darker elements of the show. So I really wish it had a season 2 as well. Ken, what are your final thoughts on Stoicism? Can you say it in bleak Stoic terms?
No, I cannot. Well, you're talking about something like, I haven't rewatched Andor. I love that show. I'm not often in that mood to go churn through all these things for an episode. In the blocks, you churn, you get a thing of action in the third, a great moment, never more than 12. All that stuff we love, but like I've not been in the mood to rewatch it. And that's just what you're talking about of the outside world, or where you at in your own life, and all those kind of things that does factor into a lot of this there. But anyways, I'm excited for what's next with Skeleton Crew. I'm excited for the movies. I am on there's not a lot of TV coming our way thing, so we'll see what's going on in those movies. And I think because they're in the movies, that the ingredients might be dispersed a little bit more. But we'll see. But and I hear you, Jen, and you're definitely not alone in this, and definitely not alone going forward, where there's probably a little bit of a lack of trust with a giant corporation answering to shareholders and what decisions they're going to make. So I think you are definitely heard here, and heard by the ForceCenter listeners.
Yeah. Yep. And again, we always want to acknowledge that these things are subjective, because that can be a challenge. We get many wonderful comments where people share their opinion in a friendly way of like, oh, wow, well, this character really worked for me, or this character really worked for me. It spoke to me for this. And then, we do get a few people who just say their opinions as facts. And that's just what we're not interested in. It's so much richer and more interesting to me to hear why something worked for you. And sometimes I'll be like, oh, I never saw it that way. I can look at it with fresh eyes, or go like, well, I'm going to continue to be different, but now I really understand where somebody's coming from. I love that. That's a good thing to me, that this is all subjective. So really want to underline that all of this is subjective. And that's what we're doing here, is sharing our opinions and reactions. And welcome to hear yours as well. either in long, flowing, expressive comments or quick Stoic comments are accepted as well. That is it. Ken, you want to take us home?
I do. We're Force Center. You can find us on social media at Force Center Pod. Facebook page is Force Center Podcast. We're on Instagram, YouTube as well. Subscribe there if you would. Podcasts available in a lot of different spots. Just search, you'll find us. Merch currently available at tpublic.com/user/Force Center. Stay tuned for updates on that. Patreon.com/Force Center is where you can support us directly. Follow me at Ken Napzok. Go to my website, kennapzok.com for more. Jen, where can they find you?
You can find me on all the social media at Jennifer Landa or TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138.
There you go. Joseph, take us home. Sounds like a John Denver song, but let's do it.
Okay. You can find me on all the social media at Joseph Scrimshaw and check out my website, josephscrimshaw.com, for links to all the other stuff I'm working on. And if you want, you can join me in writing letters to encourage people here in the United States to vote in this upcoming election. Up and down the ballot, there's an organization called Vote Forward that allows you to write letters where you tell voters why voting is important to you. Just encourage people to use their power. If that is at all of interest to you, you can check out all the details on their website, votefwd.org. That is it. That is the end of our very emotional, not Stoic episode of Force Center.